everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to use the Hero Arts Transfer Rub-Ons. All of the supplies that I'm using to create these cards will be listed down below in the video description and over on my blog. Now you can use these techniques with any of the Hero Arts transfers, but I'm going to be using these snowflake transfers. Right now we are having Christmas with no snow, which is driving me crazy, so I'm bringing the Christmas and the snow to my cards. Now for one of the cards, I am going to be using the Hero Arts Acetate Sheets. I believe these were about 5 by 7, so I'm going to trim this down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 because I'm going to create an A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Now for the transfers, I don't remember the exact size offhand, but I know that I wasn't able to get 4 1/4 out of 2 panels. So I cut it in half, which is going to be, I think, about 4 inches. I just really wanted to get the most out of this. Now these transfers are on backing sheets, so you peel away your transfer, and I'm going to apply this to my acetate. I just put a piece of white cardstock underneath so you can see it. I'm lining up the bottom left-hand corner and just slowly letting that fall down onto the acetate. I really want to be careful that I'm not getting any bubbles in there. I started by taking the popsicle stick and rubbing that on. I don't recommend pushing very hard because I did show it somewhat on the acetate. So what I did is actually took it over to my die cut machine, placed in a cardstock shim, and ran it through my die cut machine to help apply that pressure. Then I'm going to carefully peel back that release paper. If you start to see some of the snowflake come up, just place it back down, rub over with your popsicle stick, and it'll attach it to your acetate. Now the acetate I'm going to use to create a shaker card, which is one of my absolute favorite ways to use the Hero Arts transfers. Now I'm taking the other piece and I'm going to place it on Deluxe smooth white cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Again, I lined that up onto the cardstock, ran it through the die cut machine, and I did have to apply a little bit of pressure on my own. I noticed that some of the snowflake was starting to peel up. You can see I did speed this process up, but I did go back over it. Now on the cardstock, it's not as noticeable the pressure you're applying with the popsicle stick, but on the acetate it is. So just be mindful and careful of that. Now I'm going to carefully peel that back. You can see here and there some pieces were coming up, so I just placed it back down, went over it again with the popsicle stick, and then was able to get a beautifully clean transfer. So now I have these 2 panels, and like I mentioned, they didn't completely cover a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch, but I wanted to get the most out of that one sheet of snowflakes because they are just so gorgeous. I love it on that acetate. It's really, really pretty. Now for the acetate, creating my shaker window, I am using the Arches Infinity die, which if you've seen me before, you know this is one of my favorite dies. And I'm figuring out about how big I want my window to be. I want to leave enough of a border on the edges to be able to add foam tape, but I didn't want to come in too far because I really want to show off those rub-ons. So after I kind of figured out the alignment, I held that down with some low tack tape and die cut out my window. So this is how it's going to start to come together, and I am absolutely loving how this is looking. I'll go ahead and attach my acetate to the back of my window. I started out by placing some double-sided tape going all the way around the edges. Now this is on the back side again of the window. And then I'm going to remove the backing of that double-sided tape using my craft pick, or you could just kind of remove it with your fingernail. And I'm going to take my acetate starting in that bottom left-hand corner and line that up. Now, any acetate that's overhanging, I can just take my scissors and trim that off. I just want to make sure I'm applying pressure really well so that it's stuck very good to the double-sided tape. Then I need to create the well for my shaker bits, and to do this, I am using these foam strips from Gina K Designs. They have a really nice loft to them, so they're great for shaker cards, and I'm going to place that all the way around my frame. So again, this is on the back side of my window. I am leaving a little bit overhanging. I will trim those ends up later. The biggest thing is that you want to make sure your foam strips are really butted up next to each other because we don't want to leave any gaps for our sequins and shaker bits to escape from. Now, sometimes depending on the shaker mix that you plan on putting inside of this, you may want to double layer your foam strip, but I'm going to leave it as just one. I think that is going to be good enough. It's got enough of a loft to contain my sequins mix, and it's just not too bulky. So once I have that done, I'm going to go around and just snip off those extra pieces that are hanging off of the edge. Now this piece is going to be getting attached to a white card panel that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, but I want to add some ink blending to that background to really give you that kind of frosty, wintry feel. So I brought out a mini glass mat that I'm going to do my ink blending on and my white cardstock, and I'm going to start with Cornflower ink from Hero Arts. I'm using a blending brush and I'm starting towards the top, and I'm going to put just a light application of color. I like to use circular motions when I'm applying my ink. Every now and then I'll bring in the window to kind of get a look at where my ink is in reference to that window. I want to make sure that I am getting a decent enough coverage and it's kind of peeking through. Leaving a light amount of color is also a very magical feeling, but I am going to go for more of an intense background. One of the fun things about this, because of the design that I used with the snowflakes, you do not have to have a perfect blend on this background because the shaker mix is going to kind of fill that in a little bit. And plus we have that design. So it's going to help kind of hide any imperfections, I guess. Now this second color I'm bringing in is Indigo ink. You can see it is a beautiful, vibrant blue. And I'm starting at the top once again, and I'm going to kind of fade off as I get towards the bottom of the card front. Again, I'm going to bring my window in every now and then to make sure that I'm getting both of those colors in there. Now that right there would have been absolutely perfect. I could really have stopped at any point when it came to this ink blending. It just depends on the look that you want. Now, as I stated, I wanted more of an intense background, so I am going to come in at the top with grape juice. You could also come in with nautical, which is a really nice dark blue, but I love the purple over the top. It's going to not only intensify the blue, but you are going to see kind of those purple hues in the background. I left this part in here of how I kind of go back and forth and really work on my blend just depending on the feel that I was going for. Again, at any point I could have really stopped. I almost debated about adding splatters because I love adding splatters, but I figured with the busyness of the design of the transfer, I really didn't need to. So I did skip my splatters for today. And as I mentioned, I'm in Wisconsin, and not having any snow right now, like zilch on the ground, is really weird for me. So I'm in a winter mood. I know the snow is coming, but I wanted to bring snow into my cards right now. You may be past the holidays, and this card would be great even for birthday cards. Maybe somebody has a January or February birthday, or you just want to send them a winter wishes card. So that is kind of where this idea for my cards came from. All right, so I finished off that panel, and I'm working on the panel where I attached the transfer to the cardstock. Now, this idea was inspired by Jennifer McGuire. I will link her video down below in my video description. What she had done was ink blended over the top of this particular transfer. Like, I was so captivated by this. I completely used the same transfer. I'm not sure about the same colors, but I loved the look of this. So she's ink blending over the top. I'm using the same colors I did on my other background. I started with the cornflower, and then I came in with the indigo ink, and I'll go to the top with the grape juice. And what this does is the transfers are resisting the ink, kind of like when you would heat emboss, but it's also giving it almost kind of a halo effect because there is a little bit of a line that goes around the transfers that you don't typically see on just plain white cardstock, but you can see it when you ink blend over the top. So I'm buffing off any of that excess ink. One thing I noticed is that when I applied my transfer, it probably should have been a landscape card, but I ink blended in the portrait orientation. You can see how some of the pieces really should have been in that landscape mode, but I'm going to pretend that that never happened, and I'm going to continue on. I'm going to trim off some of the edges just on the sides, not on the top and bottom portion. So this is going to end up measuring, I believe it is 3 3/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And what that does is it cleans up my edges because my transfer was a little short, and it also gives me a nice white margin on the edge. Now back to my shaker card, I'm going to finish that up. I did go over that blended background with an anti-static powder tool really quick, just a quick swipe. And then in the well of my shaker card, so on the back side of the window where we have the foam strips, I'm adding in some winter sequins mix, and I'm also adding in some of the Icicle Sequins mix. These are both from Hero Arts. Now the sequins packets, the sequins is, it's normal size, but it's actually quite large compared to, I only have one layer of foam strips here. So you want to make sure none of the sequins mix are piled up on top of each other. You want them to be fairly spread out and flat. Then I'm going to go ahead and remove the backing of that foam tape. I'm just kind of carefully holding down my panel. I don't want it to bump because then my sequins will kind of pop out onto the sticky parts of the foam tape. So I'm just being careful of that. Then I'm going to take the background, flip that over, make sure I'm the right side up. Start again in that bottom left-hand corner and just gently guide that around. I don't want to pull the cardstock tight because I don't want this to bend or warp. And I'm just gently pressing down to secure the edges. And then when I flip this over, we have a successful shaker card, which with this snowflake window, it's absolutely magical in my opinion. So as I kind of shake it around, everything was secured down good. None of my sequins bits are popping out. And that really helped having that powder, I think, in the background because my sequins is moving around nicely. Now for this panel that I trimmed down, I am going to pop up this panel just a little bit so I have some foam strips that I'm going to add to the back of the panel. And then I can remove the backing of these foam strips and add it to the white card panel that I have cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So again, this is going to leave me a nice kind of a small margin on the right and left hand side. And also that foam strips is giving me a little bit of a lift. So there are my 2 card fronts so far. I'm going to be using the same sentiment set for both of these. It keeps it kind of easier and consistent. This is the Christmas sentiment strips from Hero Arts. There's also a coordinating die to die cut all these out. So all of these sentiments, there are some Christmas, there's holiday, there's just some winter wishes on here. There's a lot of really great sentiments on here. You can see that they are all on one stamp, one piece. It's not separated out. So I have white cardstock here that is cut to 5 1/2 by 8 1/2 because I want to make sure, excuse me, that I'm leaving room for my to die cut it out. And I'm inking this up in pitch black ink. I am going to stamp it multiple times because you can see I really need to ink up my pitch black. It needs to be re-inked. So I'm going to stamp it multiple times, make sure that I have that nice black impression. And then I'm going to use the coordinating die to die cut all of these sentiments out at once. Now, when I do this, I am going to place some tape on all of the corners to make sure that it is holding it down and everything is going to die cut straight and that my die is not going to shift when I run it through my machine. Now, I also could have heat embossed these, maybe in silver, did a dark blue cardstock, something like that. But I really wanted the focus to be yes on the sentiment, but also that design because I put so much work into it. So that is why I went with just white cardstock with a black sentiment. So I did pick out a couple that I liked. I decided to go with 2 lines on each card front. I'm taking this scrap piece. This was from the window that I cut, and I'm going to trim off some just skinny strips of this plain white cardstock. And I'm going to use that to back my sentiments. So that way I don't need to dig out any more foam squares or foam strips. I just add liquid glue to the back of the sentiments and add those onto those plain white cardstock strips that I die cut out. Now for aligning on the front of my card, I am going to be using a T-square ruler. That's going to help me make sure that my sentiments are straight. I just need to make sure that I have even margins on each side. So I'm using that for the top and the bottom. And that liquid glue is giving me a little bit of wiggle room if I need to adjust things. Now with acetate, you really need to be careful. You don't want it to slide and shift too much because your glue will show on the acetate. So I'm just being very careful, and then I will put something heavy on these and let that sit for a minute or so while that glue dries. Now, these cards are great as is. I decided I did want to bring in some of the sequins mix that I used in the shaker card. So I am adding some of that to the panel that I ink blended over the top of the transfers. I'm just adding a dab of liquid glue. I have this place and pierce tool that I'm using to pick up the sequins and also kind of push down the sequins. And then another thing that I like to do, especially with sequins that have the hole in the middle, is I like to take the sparkle lacquer pen and add a dot of that to the centers. It also gives me a little bit more sparkle. So I will do that on both of the card fronts. I really like it on the shaker card because then I almost feel like some of those are kind of held in place. So it's kind of a optical illusion maybe type of thing. So here are my finished card projects. Love, love, love using the acetate and the transfers for shaker cards. It's got to be my absolute favorite way to use the transfers. And now here is that magical background that I did where I ink blended over the top. Another really fun way to use these. Again, all of the supplies that I used today will be listed down below in the video description and over on my blog. I will also be placing up-close pictures there as well if you wanted to save that for future reference. I hope you enjoyed today's inspiration and card tutorial. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you again real soon.